your issue, of your client's issue.
Yeah.
All right, so Danny, how we doing?
You're good. You see the zip forms booklets over on the TRG site?
Okay, everybody's here. Looks like we got a good group here, 17. And I know we've got a couple of our real veteran agents here, so hopefully you can add to my presentation today. And I'd like to make this as open as possible. My goal is to go through some tips on getting offers accepted in this very competitive market. You know, I've heard from CAR that Southern California, it's typical to see anywhere from 10 to 20 offers on residential properties, especially the lower price, the under $1 million homes. We've experienced up to maybe $1.5 million having multiple offers, at least a dozen offers. And I'm amazed that the last listing that Danny and I had, it was at 1.2. And I think we had, was it 12 or 14? That was a few months ago. And these are buyers that submitted their pre-approvals, and they had pre-approvals going up to $1.5 million, which means that there's over a dozen buyers at that time in the marketplace for a Torrance home at $1.5 million that were pre-approved. So you know that segment is a very hot market, and it's even hotter on the lower price stuff if you can get something in that $600,000 to $800,000 price range. And as hot as we think it is here in Southern California, when Danny and I, when we get on to the CAR announcements, we hear that up in the Bay Area, in San Francisco, San Jose area, that they're getting 40 to 50 offers on their properties. And the listing agents have gotten real spoiled in that they want offers now because there's so many buyers out there that have no conditions. In other words, no loan, no inspection, no appraisal condition. And those are the ones that they're looking at. And because there's so many offers, they can get that up there. So we're not that crazy down here. CAR, in fact, is concerned about that because there's lots of lawsuits going around now for clients that have backed out even after removing their conditions. So we'll talk a little bit about that also. All right, so first off, I want to, especially for the benefit of the new agents, Danny has pulled up our website. When you first log into trgrealestate.com, you can see the address at the top middle up there. trgrealestate.com. You go to the home page, click on that agent login in the top right up there, and you'll see they'll ask you for the password. Password is sold, SOLD, and that'll take you to, can you go back a page, Danny?
Yeah, let me pull it up here.
So it'll take you to this page, and if you notice all of this list of PDFs here, these are all the downloads, and this is typically what we cover in most of the lunch and learns, at least the ones that Danny and I do over the year. But most importantly, especially for today, is this zip form booklet. So if you click on that, that's near the bottom. That zip form booklet, when you click on that, you'll get a choice. Go ahead, if you can go to the next page, of downloading the whole booklet, which is about 70 or 80 pages. Let's go ahead and click on that just so we can go through the table of contents on that.
For the zip forms?
Yeah, the booklet. Yeah, the whole booklet. So this is the booklet, and this is the table of contents. So we've got about 70 pages, and this represents most of the forms that are needed in a typical residential transaction that are filled out. So this is a template when you aren't sure as to what goes on a listing agreement or what goes into a purchase agreement or any of the other forms, look to this, because these are all filled out kind of like what we want to see when you're filling up the paperwork for your file. And there's a closing checklist also. So if you just notice, I'm using Bob and Betty buyer and Sam and Sherry seller, and I'm signing and filling them all out. So this is something that you should be looking at, especially before you call us to ask questions, because I think most of them can be answered here. If we go back, the other option though, rather than clicking on this booklet, is today we're just going to look at the RPA, which is the one that's right below it, the highlighted RPA. This typically is a 3-hour class that I do that just kind of goes over this 10-page purchase agreement. The highlighted stuff is the stuff that I usually touch on. Some of it's new to this 2018 edition. And by the way, there's a new one that's actually, been in the works now for a year, that's supposed to come out because of COVID. They pushed it to the end of this year. But it's going to be somewhere around 16, 17 pages for the purchase agreement. But we've already received copies of it, and it's nothing to be afraid of. It's the same as this. It's just in a different format. You'll have about 3 or 4 pages in the beginning that are listed kind of like a spreadsheet in Excel
multiple
format.
offers summary.
Yeah, like the office summary sheet also, where it just gives you all the numbers and the dates. So it kind of makes it a little bit clearer as to an overview of what's included in that 16, 17 pages. But the clauses, most of the clauses and everything remain the same. Yeah, and if you have any questions, just yell, raise your hand, use the chat. We'll probably see it, but please interrupt me as I go through this. So this purchase agreement, which we did, it's about a year old right now. This is what you should be using when you're writing an offer. Use this as a template. For example, I'm just going to briefly go through this. I'm not going through terms. I'm just going through the fill-in today because I want to get to some of the specifics in how to best write this offer. So in this example, it's a $500,000 property. Put in that 30-day escrow up there at the very top under 1D for 30 days, unless the seller specifically tells you something different. I like to do that. That's usually the quickest that lenders can get a new loan today. In fact, it's typically running 40 or 45 days, but you want this offer to look as good as possible when you're representing this buyer. In this case, it's a 10% down, 40,000 plus 10,000 is the earnest money deposit for that $500,000 price. You don't need to write any checks. If you notice, everything else is blank on this because the buyer is going to do a direct deposit. Under at the bottom of this, under 3E, I just wrote in there seller to credit 5,000 because this is agents ask, where do I put that? And that's typical for a low down payment buyer or a first time buyer. Usually they're going to want some credit, especially if it's an FHA loan. They may have the 3.5% for the down payment, but they don't have the $10,000 for the closing costs. So this is where you would put this. Obviously, in this market today, you want to avoid that if at all possible. All right, let's go on to the next page. On this page, this is page 2. It shows two of the 3 conditions or contingencies, and I use that synonymously. There's 3 contingencies in this RPA, and on this page, there's 2 of them. Under I, it's the appraisal, and you notice that the default is 17 days, and we've changed it to 10. And then the loan contingency under J3, just below this, is 21 days. And I've changed that to 10 days. So, and the third contingency is item 14. We can go to that later, unless you can pull that up. Okay, thank you. Item 14 is the inspection of the property, and the default on that for the buyer is 17 days. And again, I've reduced that to 10. So this is typically what I would recommend to make your offer look attractive, is make all of these conditions for 10 days. I've always complained, because it's been about 5 years, that CAR has used these 3 contingency periods with different time frames. You've got 2 at 17 and 1 at 21 days, which to me is crazy. And they've made that correction in the new RPA that we're getting at the end of the year. I think they're all at 17 days. And the reason for that is, if a buyer removes the appraisal contingency and says, you know, hey, I don't care if the appraisal comes in low, I've got enough money to cover that additional amount if the appraisal comes in low, especially in this market. And we've already looked at the property, we've checked it out. You know, we're going to waive that inspection contingency. But they leave in this J3 down here, right, at the default of 21 days. So that basically means, if you're representing that seller, that you got to tell that seller, hey, even though they remove these other contingencies, this is a 21-day condition. And they can, that buyer can technically back out for any reason, just by saying, oh, you know, I don't like the terms on the loan. You know, interest rate is 0.1% higher, or whatever their excuse is. You know, I don't like the prepayment penalty in it, and say, I don't want to do the loan. And in a 30-day escrow, they can back out on day 21 and get their money back. And the problem is, when you're representing the seller's going to get upset at you as the listing agent, because they thought they had this deal where the buyer had removed these conditions. So my point of that is, when you have these 3 contingencies, the contingency is basically on this property until that last one is removed. And on that contingency removal form, what you want is that last box, I think it's at 3C, that says we're removing all contingencies. So that's the goal when you're writing these offers, is to get that contingency removal sign where they're removing all of them. And the reason that you need to understand this is, when you're writing these offers for the buyers, a lot of agents out there, a lot of listing agents, they don't understand this. So what I recommend, if you have a strong buyer, and we'll talk about that pre-approval, if you have a strong buyer, even if it's an FHA or you know, 10% down or whatever, waive that appraisal contingency. And if the buyers have already been pre-approved, which we'll talk about, you can even waive that pre-approval. Now, the only contingency that you're going to need is the inspection. And our inspectors can typically get out to the property within 3 or 4 days. So that means you can put in, the only condition is the inspection on item 14, and just put a 7-day contingency period. This is going to make your offer look really good, even though you have a 30-day escrow, and it's going to be more comparable to an all cash buyer or somebody that's putting a large down payment down. Now, again, to reiterate, this buyer has to have additional funds in case the appraisal comes in low, that they can put that additional money down. They have to be pre-approved. I recommend, in today's market especially, that you get your buyer formally approved. In other words, It's not just calling the lender up and the lender on the phone saying, okay, I'm going to give you a pre-qualification letter for, in this case, $500,000. No, we want your buyer to be pre-approved either by a DU, which is a direct underwriter, or have that mortgage rep or that lender do a full package. In other words, they've verified all of the buyer's jobs and income, and W-2 tax returns, whatever it is needed, and they've given him an approval for X amount of dollars based on an appraisal. So that's the goal, to be competitive in this market. I wouldn't be spinning my wheels, because you're going to be writing all of these offers. They're not going to get accepted if you've got a 21-day contingency in here. All right, so let me open it up to questions or comments on writing those, how to handle those 3 contingencies that are in the RPA. Carol, I know you've got a comment. Anybody?
I can figure it out. Chat.
We can hear you.
Oh, you can? Oh, good.
Yep.
Oh, but this is Linda Meyer, and
Hi,
I was
Linda.
going to say that, hi, I just got an accepted contract, and it is in Orange County, but we had 10 days on all the contingencies, but my buyer was what they called a conditional approval, where he had been through underwriting, he's fully approved. And I think that made all the difference of us getting the accepted contract, like
Yeah,
you were
good.
saying, Derf.
Okay, excellent. So when you went in, did you still have the 3 contingencies?
There were 10 days each.
Okay, good.
And so, but we have to meet that, we have to meet the turnaround. I'm at an inspection today. We're having the appraisal and the termite on Monday. And
Oh,
I
good.
think we're going to be setting fairly well.
But if you have an approved buyer, you should be able to do the inspection. If you're doing other inspections like a termite report or your home inspection, and you should even be able to get that appraisal done within that 10-day period, which means, for example, you could have just done 10 days on the loan or 10 days on the inspect, or just pick one of them for that 10 days to make the offer look better. But if the appraisal, for example, comes in low, because you should have it within those 10 days, you can always back out and say, hey, I really don't like the color of the bedroom in the back. An attorney is going to tell you, well, that's not what the contract states, but in practice out there, these buyers back out. They have that right to back out based on that, whatever that contingency is still standing. So that's another option, is you could keep all 3 contingencies in and just put a limit of 10 days. That's basically how this offer is written in the booklet. But I would be more aggressive in this market. And again, if the buyer has the additional funds where they can come in with a higher down payment, if the appraisal comes in light, I would remove those other contingencies. Any other comments on that?
So Derf, we had an interesting situation for a property in Lake Elsinore. We went in with no appraisal contingency and 17-day loan approval. However, once we opened escrow and the appraiser tried to schedule an appointment, there was a communication issue between the listing agent and the appraiser, and they scheduled the appraisal for about 15 days out. And so, we had to talk to the listing agent again and try to get an extension on the loan approval, because it was just too far away.
Yeah, well, again, you could have just removed the other conditions and just done the loan condition for 7 days or 10 days. And if you run into that problem, your buyer just says, hey, I've either got to back out or you've got to give us another week to get the inspection of the property by the appraiser done. So, you know, the idea is you got to get your foot in the door. You got to get this offer accepted. And if you're doing 17 days and there's 20 offers out there, you know, you're probably not going to get it. It's been my experience that most sellers, they're willing to give up a week or 10 days almost to any buyer. But they want to make sure that it's going to close, even if it's a 60-day escrow. They just want all of those conditions removed within that first week or 10 days.
Right.
Yeah, I wouldn't use 17 days in this market if you're in competition. Okay, any other comments?
I was going to mention that we had the issue with when we list a income property that we always get the standard single family residence RPA, which is
Yeah.
always going to put you at the bottom of the list. So make sure you're filling out the correct form. Just like on here, if it's like a probate, you know, attach the correct thing, the trust, and fill out the names correctly too.
Yeah, good point, Danny. As an experienced agent, it's important to me when I'm representing the seller and you get, you know, a dozen or 15 or 20 offers. I enjoy going through the contracts, and you can tell those agents that are new or they're overlooking stuff. So it's important that you do it correctly. For example, you know, we have a probate listing now, and the agents aren't using the probate form. Or I would say we had 4 or 5 offers on our units that were on single-family residence forms. So agents, you know, should know better. And when you get to pick and choose which agent you want to work with, you're going to put them, as Danny said, you're going to put them on the bottom of the stack, assuming somebody else is willing to offer the same amount of money. So make sure that the offers are written correctly, and that's what we're here for. So anytime you want to write up an offer, do a draft of it, send it to me. Even though, like Danny's in Hawaii right now, even though we're out of the office, I'm available 7 days a week. I'll be glad to review any of your paperwork and check it out before you submit it, just to make sure that you've got everything set up. Okay, any other comments? I want to get into when you present this offer, when you send this offer over, make sure you supply your source of funds. So that's either a bank statement, or if they're getting it out of some savings or stock, wherever they're getting their funds, you need to send that statement along with that pre-qualification, pre-approval, hopefully, from the lender. When you're sending the bank statements, you know, black out anything that's personal. If you don't want their account numbers or anything in there, you can black that out. But you need to send that over. I also want to touch a little bit on love letters. That's the buyer letters that are sent along with the offer, the RPA, and the pre-approvals. For years, I would say 15 plus years in my teaching at El Camino College, I teach a real estate practice class. That's my favorite class to teach, because these are actually agents or wannabe agents as to working in the industry. So you're past the basics of principles, and now you're out there in the field. And one of my class projects that I do, it's usually at the end of the semester, is I divide the class up into groups, usually 4 or 5 different groups or teams, and I give them all the same RPA, the same purchase agreement. It's actually one that we did in class that they all have copies of, and say, okay, you all have the same contract at $500,000, 10% down, that you're buying this property, and I want 5 presentations, one from each of these groups, on your buyer. And why is the seller going to accept your offer over the other 4 offers? And so it's a very interesting exercise because everybody is dealing with the same terms. The difference is how they're presenting their offer. And this is where these love letters, we've got pictures, you've got, stories about the sellers serving in Vietnam, serving in Iraq, serving in Afghanistan, nurses, having 12 kids, all these different stories to make their offer look better. And so that's the purpose of my school exercise is, thank you, Danny. This is a sample of
This is one that we used a couple years ago.
Of one of the love letters. Now, unfortunately, just over this last year, CAR has come down hard on management of real estate offices saying, hey, you can't use these. So my first opinion is, hogwash. We've been doing this for decades. And Gov Hutchinson, he's I think he's the lead attorney or legal head of CAR. He was at our office meeting, I don't know if it was last month or 2 months ago. What he explained, he goes, the problem under all of the discrimination laws that we have now is that when you're representing a seller, you really, as a listing agent, you should not use these love letters. You should not present them to your client. And the problem being is that, as we know, the agents that have done this, we typically promote these family values, where we've got 3 kids and a dog, and we want to be able to walk to the church that's down the street. So they're bringing in religion. They're bringing in all of these protected classes that we are supposed to be blind to. And the problem is that if that seller accepts buyer's A offer, and buyer B, who doesn't have any kids, finds out that, oh, gee, they really selected this because of the family, well, that's a lawsuit. That's a lawsuit against the seller. So I know it's kind of a stretch, and anybody can sue anybody for anything, but I've taken the position that I can't promote our agents using these love letters. However, what you can do, and what we've been seeing more recently, is when you think it's in a position where you think that seller is going to like your buyer. In other words, this is a family home where they've raised their kids. They're retiring to Canada, and they really would like to have a young family buy this house. If you feel that is the motivation of the seller, then I would make darn sure that I brought those buyers in to view that house when the sellers were there. And so this way, it's kind of a back door to where the buyers can actually meet the sellers, see what nice people they are, they're a school teacher, they're a nurse, whatever their history is, and converse with those buyers. So the reality is this is important in maybe 10 or 20% of the transactions. A lot of the transactions, the sellers don't care. They're just looking at the bottom line. But, and it's been my experience, and I'm sure Carol and Keith is out there. I'm sure you've seen this over the years where sellers are willing to take less money because they can pick who the buyer is for the property. We just can't be the ones that discriminate in any way. So it's a backdoor approach to letting the sellers know what type of buyer it is, and see if they like these buyers, they might be more willing to negotiate with them rather than one of the other 20 offers. Okay.
Yeah, I would say if the family works too, if they come and view the property, have them the second time come with all the kids and everything. That way they get to see it.
Yeah. And as Mary just said in her chat, that she puts in her notes that the seller will not review any buyer letters. So I think that's good. That's a good way to protect your seller, especially in these times. But even having said that, I would still have my buyers over to that property and meeting the sellers. Carol?
For years, I used to do just a little recap in the email. It didn't go to the seller. It went to the agent that said, you know, Jane has been working at 1, 2, 3, 4 job for 10 years, and John has been working here for, and it just showed stability. That's how I looked at it. And they've been pre-approved, da 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 da, and it's just like 2 or 3 lines. It has nothing to do with family. It just has to do with they have the stability to get the loan.
Right.
And that's all it had to do with.
Yeah, and that's fine, Carol. The problem though is when I'm dealing with 250 agents, you have to tread lightly. There's 22 protected classes now. I can't even name them all. You know, where it used to just be religion, and now it's gotten into family. It's even jobs, even income is a protected class. So some people may not like the way, let's say you get your money from a marijuana dispensary, you own a marijuana dispensary or something. That's discriminatory. You can't use that. So you just gotta be protected. And I don't want to get too overboard on this because you know, personally, I've never seen a discrimination lawsuit, and we haven't had that problems. But you know, you have to know that this is an issue out there, and there are listing agents that do not want them, and that's because their brokers have you know, scared them into, hey, you know, you can't touch these and you can't forward them. So again, my recommendation is don't use the love letters, but do have your buyers meet the sellers if that's at all possible. Okay. Other comments? Also, I want to touch back on Betsy.
Yeah, I have a question. I'm kind of confused because it seems like when you pre-qualify someone, if I'm selling my house, I want to know what they do, what their source, I want to know their source of down. I want verification of income, source of down, but also I want to know, make sure they have job stability and to be able to ask those questions of what they do. Is that protected now? So I just have to go with a blind note from the bank?
Well, yes and no. For example, if they have a pre-approval, it says that they can, in your instance, that they're, you know, pre-approved for a $2 million loan. Yeah, you've got to just accept that.
Okay.
You can't delve into what type of work are you doing, because that you could discriminate against, you know, oh, they work for Raytheon, or they work for Boeing, and it's like, well, you know, they have military contracts and I don't like them, or whatever the reason is, or it's a mom and pop. I mean, and that can be considered discriminatory. Income is a new protected class just over, I think, these past 2 years. So our duty as a listing agent, even on the buyer side, is to provide the information as far as the pre-approval, but not the details that can be discriminatory.
Okay, thanks.
You can
Whatever
give information to the seller though, like on the lender. If you call them to get a feedback or update on that and they don't return your call, obviously you don't want to use that lender.
Yeah, and again, there's no reason why, Betsy, in your case, that the seller can't be talking to the buyer directly.
Okay.
And you know, we just don't want to, as an agent, we just don't want to be the person that they're suing in this. Okay, so a couple other things on getting these offers. So Elva, if you want to, let's pull up. Let me tell you a story. This is what Elva wrote on her last offer as a joke, as an addendum to the purchase agreement. I think there were 20 some offers on this property. And if you know Elva, she's got a pretty crazy sense of humor. So she put this, it's an unsigned addendum that she attached to that offer. You know, I like the last one. For the love of God, please accept our $50,000 over asking price offer so we can have a home. And it worked in that she didn't get accepted because her price was still less than the accepted one. But the agent said that they will keep her as the backup if there's any problems. And in this market, we're seeing more transactions not be completed because everybody's jumping in to get their foot in the door, and after they sleep on what they've purchased and the high price, a lot of times they just back out. So I think she still has a chance to get it. So this is just one of the crazy things I've seen. I've also heard of agents that will send a care package to the seller. The one when we were over in Marble Estates over here, the agent said, yeah, that the buyer, there was like 20 offers. The buyer sent a package to the seller, hand delivered on the doorstep, and it had
Hot chocolate,
hot chocolate,
popcorn,
and a letter, basically a love letter, stating that, oh, please choose our offer because our kids want to be able to make the s'mores on your barbecue in the back and camp out, and they wrote this really nice letter to the seller. So that's the kind of stuff that's going on, and that's how far people are going to get offers accepted. Questions?
I have a comment. The biggest challenge I'm noticing is with my FHA buyers who have enough money for their down payment and closing costs, but they don't have enough money to play the game of extra monies. Could never ask them to remove their appraisal contingency.
Yeah.
It breaks my heart to think that we would have to do that, and then I would put them into a position that they couldn't move forward. They'd be forced to.
Right. Well, and you don't want to do that, Carol, as you know, and I know you wouldn't. So let me tell you a story about Billy. That's my middle son. He bought his first condo. This was 10, 12 years ago, right after the crash. So this would have been about 2008, 9.
2009, 10.
Yeah. And they had all of the short sales that were on the market. And if you recall at that time, it was crazy like this, or multiple offers, it was all cash offers. And here I've got Billy. It's actually, he couldn't afford it himself. He went in with his school roommate, and the two of them were looking for a condo, at least a 2-bedroom condo that they could purchase together to get their foot in the door. And they're FHA. We had a full approval on them, but they didn't have cash to put an extra $20,000 down if the appraisal came up short.
That's back when condos were 200,000.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so we wrote, I don't know if there's 10 offers, but at least 6 or 7 offers FHA, and we were getting beat out on all of these. And so what we ended up doing is we just focused on those properties that had been on the market for 30 days. And I know there aren't many now, but there are sellers, because we run into them. When Danny and I, when we list properties, we tell, hey, list it at market. We get multiple offers, and we get to pick and choose. But there's always sellers out there that say, oh, I want to list mine over market, and it'll stay on the market for 30 days. So those are the ones that you can negotiate with. Those are the ones where you can keep a loan contingency in there, maybe for a couple of weeks until that appraisal comes in. So that's what I would focus. I don't see how an FHA buyer can really compete against other buyers right now in this marketplace. You got to get those. You got to go specifically for those listings that have been on the market, or maybe have come back and they're not getting, multiple offers. And a good way is always talking. And that's another thing I have in my notes here. Whenever you're dealing with a buyer and you're putting in an offer, have a conversation with that listing agent. I know sometimes it's hard to get a hold of them, but if you can't talk to them and get some feedback as to the number of offers and what the seller's situation is, you've got slim chance or none in getting yours accepted. So, be persistent in talking to that listing agent and finding out what the motivation is of the seller, how many offers there are, et cetera, et cetera. I always ask, what kind of terms do you want as far as an escrow period? A lot of times the sellers need to have 60 days. Also services so that you can put their escrow and their title company and just write that in the contract to make everything easy for them and make that contract look even better when it's presented. So have that communication with the seller. If you've got that FHA buyer, find something that's been on the market where you're not competing with that in those first few days with a dozen or so offers, because you really can't compete. I don't see how you can't compete with that FHA. And a couple other things before we close here. I want to talk about appraisals and escalation clauses. Anything else? Any other thing you want me to hit on?
As I mentioned on the home inspection and termite, is if the offer is going to get accepted, schedule that as soon as possible, because you can always cancel it. And with the market being crazy like this, I know with Andy's and some of the other ones, it's still about 7 to 10 days. And if you only have 10 days to do stuff, you need to get the inspections done as fast as possible.
Yeah, that's really good. And that's part of my listing presentation. And I order that right away. And recently I've been ordering it even before I get the listing, since it's free. And I tell the sellers, I go, hey, this is part of my team. We can get you this this inspection. In fact, if I order it now, it'll be next Friday. So get that ordered right away. There's a big difference when you're looking at offers and that the termite work is going to be $500 versus $5,000. Because if you don't know that, then you can be spinning your wheels. And when the buyer finds out, hey, there's $5,000 here, and then you're back to negotiating again this contract. So get that handled as quickly as you can. The same with city reports. Los Angeles, for example, it takes at least 2 weeks, sometimes 3 weeks, and that's a condition of the sale. It's not one of the contingencies that are written in there, but if you have a buyer that removes all their contingencies in 7 days, as the contract states, but they haven't been presented the city report, which is a mandatory report. Well, they have 5 days from receipt to back out of that offer. So anything that's mandated, you want to make sure that you have that up front. If the contract calls for a termite report, right, then you want to make sure that termite report is done prior to the time period that you have. If your seller's going to get, if you're a listing agent, your seller's going to get very upset. You got a buyer that removed all conditions in 7 days, and then the city report comes in, and for whatever reason, I mean, it doesn't have to be legitimate, but if the buyer says, "Oh, gee, I don't like this city report," right, they can back out and get their money back. And normally that means that seller is going to be pissed at the listing agent also. Question, Betsy?
Yeah, my question is if you've had a transaction fall through, and I learned from your presentation, because mine had 17 days for the inspection, and they waited for the very last day to back out. So I wish I would have put 10 on that. So thanks for letting me.
That's typical. I mean, everybody waits, and it's usually the other tip. I'll interrupt you right here, so I don't forget this. Whenever you have a time period, whether it's the 10 days or the 17 days, if it's 17 days, on day 15, you send them that notice to perform. This is one of the things Danny taught me, because that gives them that 2-day notice to remove that condition when their time's up. Most agents don't do that. And if you don't hear from them on day 17, then that means you're going to be giving them a 2-day notice to perform, typically on day 18, which means they've got until day 20 to make a decision. And if it falls on the weekend, it goes to the next Monday. So, you've just got to be educated in what this contract says. As Danny has highlighted here on your screen, this is calendar days, but for any performance of any act required by this agreement, close of escrow, contingency removals, shall not include any weekend or holiday. So if you don't be proactive and give that notice 2 days before the deadline, or even earlier if it's falling on a weekend, that 17-day contingency period could be 21, 22, 23 days. So make it to 10 days on day 8, send that notice, send it on day 7 if it happens to fall on a weekend, so that they will have to make that decision by the end of the day on day 10 or whatever the time frame is. Does that make sense?
It does. And
Yeah.
that's for all contingencies too, then, right?
Correct.
Not, okay. But what I was going to ask is, well, actually 2 things. One is, what is the value of the previous buyer's reports? Like, for instance, they got a termite report, they got a home inspection. Is that something that by law I have to give them? And is that
Yes.
something they can use? Can they use those?
Yes.
The
Well,
next one.
I don't know if they can use them, but yes, by law, you have to give, and that's on the SPQ, on the seller property questionnaire. On the last page of that, next time you're in Betsy, if you have questions, I'll be glad to go through that. But on that SPQ, one of the last items in that, they're asking, not on the purchase agreement, but on the on that SPQ, it asks the seller, says, hey, have you ever gotten any estimates, any reports, any inspections ever on the property?
They can be verbal or written too.
Yeah, verbal. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, verbal or written, which is, I mean, that opens a Pandora's box of all kinds of stuff. Now, you as a seller may not think it's material to give them a 10-year-old property inspection report or an appraisal that was done when you refinanced 5 years ago, right? But the buyer may think that that's material and can sue you over that. So that's the bottom line is you disclose everything that you have.
Okay, but but with the termite report, can they use that termite report if it's pretty current?
I think for
Well,
escrow, they're good for 6 months, I think.
Oh, good, okay.
yeah, but lenders do not require termite reports. So that's it's going to be between the clients as to whether or not they want that. Or yeah, a buyer can say, oh, this is 2 months old, I want a new one, and get one, or he can get one from a different company. I mean, they have the right to do that in their inspection period.
And then my last question is you were talking about the city reports. As far as I know, I didn't know, like, do all cities have them? Like, does Rancho Palos Verdes have them? Does Hermosa Beach have them? What cities have these reports?
Yeah, so check with the escrow officer in the city that you're going to be working in to confirm. That's your best source. Offhand, Gardena, Redondo Beach, all of Los Angeles requires it. I'm not sure about the 3 or 4 communities in PV as to which ones have a sale report that's required.
Carson does.
Carson, thank you. Oh, that's right. Carson doesn't do that anymore, right?
Well, they still have the fee, I think, for it, but they don't have, is it like a drive-by?
Yeah, no, they actually did away with that. Compton has a real strict sale report, but those are important and those are required by law.
Oh, Lawndale, the Lawndale one had it.
Yeah, Lawndale has one for their make sure that nobody's living in the garage. You got to sign with a notary. I think that the seller has to sign that
But Lawndale is good for building reports because they're still in vanilla folders.
Yeah,
They're not digital yet.
yeah. Yeah, and a lot of the cities, I've had no problems working with even Redondo Beach and Gardena and getting these reports, but it's just another hassle. But those, if it's required, then those have to be given to the buyers. They have to sign for those, and that's a condition. So they've removed all of their other conditions, the 3 contingencies that are in their contract, and you give them a city report afterwards. That's an out for them. They can back out anytime within that 5 days.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments on that? Okay, so appraisals and escalation clauses, and we'll get out of here. I'm amazed in this marketplace because these properties are selling for so much over the list price that we don't have more problems with appraisals. It's rare. In fact, maybe just once or twice a month, well, I hear from one of our agents that is fighting an appraisal. All offers are to me are way over market value on these properties, but the appraisers are being more aggressive in giving those. And historically, in all markets and past markets, we've always had problems with appraisals. There's always appraisal problems, buyers markets, sellers markets, whatever. So I'm not seeing any increased problems with appraisers, which is good news. And lastly, escalation clauses. So this is when a lot of agents, they want to put in their offer, or even when you're representing a seller, you'll see these on the offers where the buyer's going to offer this $500,000 or $5,000 over any other offer that's being presented. So that's an escalation clause. They are legal. However, we don't advise agents to use that. First off, you've got to be able to protect your client, because you don't want somebody coming in with $1 million offer, and now that means you have to be $1,005,000 in order to beat it. So you want to have a ceiling price that you're willing to offer. And for example, if we're using this $500,000, if the buyer says, well, I'll put that escalation clause in there, but make it $520, that's because that's the most, right? Well, you as the experienced, veteran, knowledgeable agent, you should tell them, let's go in at $520. Let's go in at your best offer, and let's see what the seller is going to say. If you get beat out, then at least you know you've done your best. And if you're the one that's selected and you have your 7 days to do your inspections and you don't like it, or you don't think it's worth that, then we can back out. But that's how I would handle it. Always get your sellers to offer their high price. Gov Hutchinson, and we have that meeting recorded from his appearance here at our office meeting. He talked briefly on these escalation clauses. The other problem is that when you have multiple offers, if you have 2, let's say you get 10 offers, well, 2 of them have escalation clauses, right? Well, that means, according to Gov Hutchinson, he's the head legal for CAR, he goes, that means both of those escalation clauses are void and you can't use them. So don't rely on those. Educate your buyer, because they may have heard this or read about it and say, oh, I want to be able to use this. Give them the CAR, there's a CAR paper on it. I think it's 3 or 4 pages. And it basically says, hey, don't use these. They're questionable as to whether or not they're legal, and just offer your top dollar to get into that property. And that's the best advice that I can offer. Danny in the chat, he just put up the link so that you can pick out any of our previous videos that we've done for our other workshops and also our other office meetings when we've had programs. Danny has been real good at recording these, putting them on Facebook. So we've got a good selection now of classes that we've been doing over this past year. All right, so any other comments here before we get off? Any other questions? I hope you picked up some tidbits today on writing these offers. Bottom line is, please send them to us for a review. Whenever I write an offer, I have Danny look at it and vice versa, because I want a second set of eyes to see if I have missed anything on my contracts.
You want
Hey,
to hit on
Derf.
the,
It's Linda
Go ahead.
Meyer. I was just going to say that I've used the BPG inspections, and they also offer a termite service. I don't know if you knew that, but I was surprised to learn that.
Oh, I didn't know that. You know, I haven't heard from BPG now in 6 months, so we're looking for another inspection company, somebody that's going to come to our office meetings and keep us updated. If you know of anybody, please have them contact me.
so do you
Well,
want
I
to talk
chose
on-
them because I had called a few agents and nobody called me back. And since they're a big company, they said they had 2 agents that
Oh,
were
good.
available. So,
Good. Yeah, Danny, anybody
the
else?
seller's counter offer? When people send the back from the offers, you said to send highest and best. Do you want to hit on that?
Oh, thank you. Okay, that's another pet peeve of mine, of ours, and of most attorneys, and we still see it. We still see it regularly that agents, when they get these multiple offers, they write on a counter offer. You know, we want Coach House escrow, and we want Cal Best title, escrow to close on such and such date, and send us your best and final offer by Friday at 5 p.m. And they send out a multiple counter offer to everybody. Well, you know, that should be a red flag to everyone, because how do you accept that counter offer, right? It's ambiguous. There's no price on that. So don't do it. And that just tells me that these agents are not being educated or trained. They don't know what they're doing, because if you put your client and they agree and they sign that, well, it messes up that whole RPA, because that becomes part of that RPA and you don't have a price. So there's going to have to be another counter. And now you're getting into 2 or 3 counter offers, and that offer is being ambiguous. Our escrow company will not open an escrow if you have more than 2 counter offers. So the whole purpose of these forms and these purchase agreements is to protect our clients from attorneys. So when you start doing stuff and you start writing clauses that we should not be doing, you're putting your clients in jeopardy. So keep your contracts clean. If you're going to have a best and final, send an email to those agents and say, you know, thank you very much for your offer. Please submit your best and final by Friday at 5 o'clock, and then we will accept or counter the best offer. And I'm not going to get into the details, but when we go through the purchase agreement on the Zip Forms booklet workshop, I talk about that counter offer, and I do not do multiple counter offers. I just accept or counter what we consider to be the best offer. And typically I'll get that accepted that day. If not, we go down to number 2 or we go down to number 3. And usually within hours, we will have a signed buyer and seller agreed upon counter offer. I don't like it when agents say, okay, you know, this on this $500,000 property, we want $550,000, and they give a multiple counter to everybody. Well, typically what happens is everybody accepts it because they know they've got 20 days or however many days for their conditions. And then that seller gets back, and then you have to sit down and then make a decision as to which one. You can't sell it to 20 people. So make that decision up front, or set a date when you're going to make that decision. Pick the best offer, go with it. Sometimes the best offer is one that's, you know, maybe $50,000 or $100,000 less, but it's all cash. So I would go to that buyer, and usually by phone or by text, and say, hey, you're in play here. Will your buyer come up to X amount on those same terms? And if so, you'll get the property. And so that's how I handle it, so that you're not wasting everybody's time and doing these multiple counters. Other comments?
I just wanted to say thank you for the offer to review contracts, because they say a cord of three is always stronger, and
Yeah.
so I'm grateful. Thank you.
All right, that's my job. That's my pleasure. Okay, guys, thank you. Thank you very much. Make it a great day. Call me. I'm in the office if you have any other questions.
Bye.
Thank you, Danny. Thank you, Danny. See you tomorrow night.
Yep, see you guys tomorrow.